Feels like there's something in the air today. I don't know what it is.
Rain.
Yeah, no. Good morning anyway. It's good to see everyone here and to be here this first day of January. So the reading for today is really brief. It's very familiar to most of you here. I was laughing to myself saying, I bet somebody might even have a tattoo of it. And it's a quote from William Penn. Let us see what love can do. And I want to append that a little bit with a partial quote from something else William Penn wrote. And it is this: if we would mend the world, we should mend ourselves. So I first off wanted to thank all of y'all for being willing to journey with me through the Advent wreath during Advent, because I thought it was kind of interesting to have those attributes kind of guide me through those weeks of winter. But I was also curious. I thought, well, if we have this Advent, and then the 30 years I spent as a Methodist, I knew about Epiphany. But I thought, what are we now that we're not in Epiphany or Advent? What does the church? What do the churches who use the calendar like that? What do they call it? And there are a few that call it Epiphany Tide, and I thought, well, it's because the tide is going out from Epiphany. We're easing out of that until Ash Wednesday, which is kind of launches another church season. But the largest majority of the churches who do follow a liturgical calendar, they call it ordinary days. Ordinary days. And I thought, what? The days that follow Christmas to me are far from ordinary. Now that the joyful holiday gatherings are all done and the festive music is off the air, probably some people are grateful for that. And all the colorful lights are kind of tucked away. For me, this is where the hard work really begins, the real work, and that we are being challenged by the story of Christmas to embody light and love. We can't turn our heads to it now. Embodying love to me is like that. Isn't that the story of the Christ child and the whole theme of Jesus's life was embodying love, embodying divine love, refusing to give in to fear and seeing what love can do, cultivating an awareness of the toxicity of fear that's within us, in our relationships, and permeates the world that we inhabit. Seeing what love will do is not an easy task, I think, from any perspective. It's much easier to go with the tide as it goes back toward fear. But I think it's especially difficult in the life that we're living now. Our nervous systems are already on high alert, and then we're constantly being bombarded by domestic and global violence that seems to have no limit to its capacity to evoke fear. If you watch the news, it's hard not to stop watching and not be all curled up in fear. But then again, remember the message of the angels that's woven throughout the Christmas story, and that's the message of fear not. And it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Fear not. The embodiment of love begins with creating an environment that is uninhabitable by fear. love and fear, to me, are mutually exclusive. If you're feeling fearful, but you think you're feeling love, then it's not love. It's something that, it might be codependence, it might be something else, but it's disguising itself as love. Love and fear can't exist in the same atmosphere. They can't inhabit the same context. So if we feed ourselves from fear, and we take that and feed it to others, then we and others will respond with fear, because I think fear begets fear, and love begets love. The question in these so-called ordinary days is, how can we actively, consciously, and intentionally shift from fear into love? How can we break the patterns that we learned and, the people who taught us learned? How can we unlearn and change our fearful thoughts and patterns and actions and reactions, and learn to live love and to breathe love, be love? How can we learn to embody love? Two international organizations, and you've heard me cite one of them, the Heart Math Institute, and A Human Workplace is another organization that have done extensive research on the benefits of love. Like we didn't know, but some people only believe it if there's a study to prove it. And numerous studies have shown that love actually reduces stress hormones that cause heart attacks and strokes that totally affect our health. It increases communication between the brain and the body. Love enhances teamwork and social interactions. This kind of love isn't the kind that contracts and minimalizes, or the kind of love that exaggerates and kind of overstates. That's not love. This kind of love builds trust and works to eliminate fear. It's actually, for me, it's hard to imagine a world without fear. But then I circle back to Christmas. Do you feel the shift in people when the holiday season begins? Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that Christmas stuff is out with Halloween stuff nowadays, because that's the sooner people are going to get happy, right? And so to me, that's a pinhole of a peek into what the world would be like if love was more dominant. I don't think there's been a study to show, but I have heard that it doesn't take a majority of love to shift a culture, just 10 or 15%. Dominance will shift a culture. But in my work as a corporate change consultant, like Mary insinuated, in the field of medicine, I faced a lot of fearful people, not the patients, but the employees who did not want to see me walk in the door. They didn't know me, but they just knew, a consultant is coming. I once encountered entire staff the first day I was there. They wore black because they were PO'd that a consultant had come in. Ooh. Yeah, I saw that. I see you. And when I saw that fear response to me, an unknown factor, I came to realize that a loving response worked better, and that in order to establish a loving response, I had to first establish honesty. And there was a Ford CEO who was brought in when they were floundering, and he had these reports that everyone had given him, that everything was hunky-dunky, to quote Christmas in Connecticut. Everything was fine, but he knew it wasn't. And it took him months to establish that honesty. And before I could establish honesty, I figured out, oh man, it's not safe for people to be honest. So how do I establish safety first? I had to reassure people that it was safe for them to open up to me and to be upfront with me. People need to feel safe sharing whatever they're experiencing, whatever they're feeling in their communities, even if it's associated with strong language. And being a woman of the 80s and 90s, even tears were not acceptable. Anger was not acceptable, and tears weren't either. But people need a safe place to vent, and they need a safe person to do it with. They need to know there's no judgment in them expressing what they're feeling and thinking. Like, you're full of baloney. That's okay. Tell me more. So I'd venture to say if this was true of all American institutions, we would not be seeing workplace violence more than once a day now. That safety does not exist. So probably not surprising to you that in my work as a hospice and hospital chaplain, I found the exact same thing. Fearful people, and in cultures that weren't safe for self-expression. And you would think that a hospital would be a place you could be yourself. But we learn to hold back strong emotions. Quite often our families and our communities, and I have to say schools and churches are a part of that, teach us to not be honest about what we're feeling and thinking. That leads us to hide our inner feelings, hide the truth of who we are. And we take that suppression everywhere we go. We all need to hear from someone, I'm not going to judge you. I'm just curious about where you're at right now. And let where they're at right now be okay. Safety and honesty work hand in hand to create a culture that's not usually associated with institutions. And I have dared in the past also to call them a loving environment. The research has shown that a genuine love that is foundational in a workplace, when that is present, efficiency and communication increases, workplace satisfaction and customer satisfaction increases. The customers don't know you're working in a culture of love, but they do. When there's staff turnover, it's done without judgment or fear. Be on your merry way. Wellness in loving communities is improved, and creative problem solving flourishes because what you have to say is safe, even if it's like, that thought would not have occurred to me. It's still safe for you to say it. And I think this is true of every community that we humans gather in. All 7 types of love, including self-love and universal love, romantic love, or relational love, all 7 types are best cultivated in a culture that's free of fear. And the presence of love is increased by dialogue and curiosity and reflection that arises out of safety and honesty. So one question to ask yourself is whether or not you bring any of these attributes to your relationships. How safe do you make it for others to be honest with you? Are you willing to dialogue with them and set aside your own opinions and your responses long enough for the other person to feel free to express themselves? Do you make room for them to speak honestly from their heart? Or are you more likely and more ready to give them a piece of your mind? I can still hear my mother saying that. Give you a piece of my mind. But I want to go deeper, a little deeper, and circle back to the second quotation I gave you from William Penn. If we would mend the world, we should mend ourselves. This was actually advice that he had written to his children. And I imagine, I didn't do the research, but I imagine they were a little older and raising their own children. But the whole quotation is, if we would mend the world, we should mend ourselves and teach our children to be not what we are, but what they might be. Mending ourselves does change the world. So if you're sitting at home mending your own heart, you are changing the world. You don't have to roll up your sleeves and go bang on a drum and run down the street doing your own mending. At least that's what I believe. How we feel about ourselves, whether it's loving or not, is the lens through which we think and we feel and we perceive and act. It influences every experience we have, and it brings to us from the world exactly what we believe about ourselves. By examining where fear controls us instead of love, even when our love comes from fear, we can begin to mend ourselves so that we can more and more often come from love that doesn't have hooks and barbs. In my book, and literally in my book, entitled Me, Myself, and I write that all types of love are rooted in self-love. It's not that soak in the bathtub and go get a massage kind of love, although, boy, I'm in. Call me and I'll be there. Self-loving practices are great, but this is the kind of self-love that rolls up its sleeves to mend ourselves. It's a healing love. It's a love that maybe needs to let go or forgive ourselves. That's the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. It's a love that much of the time is hard work. And its goal isn't to fix anything or anybody, ourselves included. It's a self-love that's curious enough that we may want to improve whatever and wherever our lives are aligned with fear and not with love. So I presented on the topic of self-love to a church Sunday school class some time ago. And afterward, one of the participants came up to me and she kind of leaned over to me and kind of snarled at me and said, "Self-love is a sin." I was kind of taken aback. But, we laugh at that idea, but how many of you were raised to believe that self-love is a sin because it's self-centered or self-indulgent, or it's hubris, I learned that big word, pride, or narcissism, in a way that puts us above everybody, makes us better than. But the Christian Gospel of Mark actually quotes Jesus as saying that second only to loving God is the commandment to love your neighbor as you love yourself. How can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? Is that pretzel logic? These days, I think, after Christmas is a perfect time for us to get real with love. What are the healthy ways you express love? And which of the ways you express love are entangled with fear if I don't do this, you won't love me. Or if I don't do this, I won't love me. Where does love in your life empower you to be the best of who you are? That's love. What are the obstacles to loving yourself more fully? Maybe you need to set some boundaries. Tough word, tough love, boundaries. Maybe you need to let go of something or practice self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. What restrictions and conditions have you put on loving others and loving yourself? Are you a tough customer when it comes to love? The ultimate self-love is when you can love and accept yourself exactly how you are, where you are, while still seeking to grow at the same time. It's from where inside you that drive, that desire to improve yourself comes from that makes all the difference. Does your desire to grow come from self-love and self-acceptance, or out of the perfectionist push, or from a lack of self-worth? I'm not good enough, so I have to keep at it. When we're coming from self-acceptance and also moving towards self-growth, we radiate self-love. And that self-love is a mending of ourselves that inspires others, and in turn, it mends the world. I consider February a perfect month to examine love. I know Benjamin Franklin despised it so much that he wanted it abolished and absorbed into the rest of the calendar. But hey, it's only 28 days. So you've got 28 days to begin to find new ways to embody love. Every day, a new way to love yourself and to love others. And that's what I'd like to challenge you to do. Just consider, how can I be love? And how can I embody love today in the month of February? When I'm back in March, I'll check in with you. See how you did. So let us see then what love can do in these ordinary days. And so it is. Amen.